Hey everyone, I'm replying to two ThereIsNoClash videos at once here, and they'll be the last ones for a while. The problems here relate closely to the problems that I've discussed in the last videos, and I think it's worth covering it to be thorough. So the first video I'm replying to is their cosmic calendar video, and that just lays out the basic idea behind their apologetic for why the Quran gives such a short and totally wrong time frame for the creation of the universe and the earth. And then the second video, their seventh heaven video, expands on that. Since I'm responding to two relatively sparse videos at once here, I'm going to cut them up a little more heavily just to get to the point. So if you want the full context, watch the originals.
I don't mean to offend you, but allow me to tell you why you're insignificant.
How dare you, sir? I'm calling my lawyer.
Your life, if you're lucky enough to live to the age of 109, is a blink of an eye, a quarter of a second. You are insignificant in the grand scheme of the cosmos. But don't let that get you down. You're also extremely fortunate to have this fleeting moment in the sun. The average ejaculate has 250 million sperm cells, and you made it, buddy.
Oh, that kind of insignificant. Well, now it makes sense. You made it, buddy. That's barely even out of context. It's just as out of the blue in the actual video as it is here. I almost feel sorry for Claire. She must be real hard up for money if she'll say creepy shit like that to pay the rent. But at least it gives me the chance to make this reference.
The average ejaculate has 250 million sperm cells, and you made it, buddy. The best scientific research currently estimates that the universe is 13.8 billion years old. But that number's so big, it doesn't really mean anything to most of us. To put it into perspective, Carl Sagan, an American astronomer, cosmologist, and astrophysicist, introduced the cosmic calendar and collapsed the entire history of the universe into just a single year. By employing this calendar metaphor, the human mind is able to approach unhuman timescales in a human format.
Claire takes a lot of time here to explain this very simple concept, and by a lot of time, I mean a lot of time. And by a lot of time, I mean 2 minutes. So I'll briefly summarize it instead. Carl Sagan's collapsed the entire history of the universe into just a single year. By employing this calendar metaphor, the human mind is able to approach unhuman timescales in a human format. Pretty simple, right? I have no idea why they wasted half the video explaining it, but whatever.
Carl Sagan's cosmic calendar did not only help us understand the age of the universe in an easier way, but it also helped us understand what is meant by two groups of verses in the Holy Quran, addressing the same topic, but written in a different way.
So to speed things up again, what ThereIsNoClash is arguing here is that the 6-day creation of the heavens and the earth in the Quran doesn't really mean 6 days, but instead it's a cosmic calendar like Carl Sagan's, except that the history of the universe is compressed into 6 days instead of 365. Which I've gotta say, if it were true, would make Allah a complete jackass if his goal is to communicate effectively in any way. Imagine if in Cosmos, Carl Sagan didn't bother to explain or illustrate his cosmic calendar concept in any way at all, and instead he just walked onto the Cosmos set and exclaimed into the camera, "The universe is 365 days old." People would think he'd gone out of his mind, and for good reason. And so he, being smart, didn't do that, and instead he explained the concept in advance so it would actually be useful to people. Likewise, ThereIsNoClash, as dumb as they are, still saw the value in taking 2 full minutes to carefully explain the concept to their audience, because they figured their viewers would be confused otherwise. Which, to be fair, is probably true about their audience in regard to most things, but that's beside the point. But any audience would be confused if they started off their video by saying, "The Quran says the universe was created in 6 days, and this is confirmed by modern science." But why didn't you do it anyway, Claire? If it's good enough for God, why isn't it good enough for you?
The first group of verses says, "It is He, God, who created the heavens and earth in 6 days." And the other group of verses says, "It is He who created the heavens and the earth and what is between them in 6 days." This is the Quranic cosmic calendar revealed over 1400 years ago.
No, that's Muhammad thinking the universe was created in 6 days. Why is it so hard for some people to accept that Muhammad believed that? It's okay, it doesn't make him dumb. Not for the time. People back then just didn't know the things we know today, and they relied way more heavily on myth. Seems kinda rude to try so hard to make it seem like he never said what he actually said, especially if you think that he was told what to say by God. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you have some really good evidence that this really is actually meant as an equivalent to Carl Sagan's cosmic calendar, despite the Quran giving no hint that it is. So go on then, let's hear it.
And let me explain why I believe the Holy Quran introduced the cosmic calendar approach first, before Carl Sagan. The answer is simple. It's because there is a great similarity between the Holy Quran's cosmic calendar and Carl Sagan's cosmic calendar. These similarities are as follows.
Alright, let's get into the evidence that convinced Claire's puppet masters that the Quran really does use this cosmic calendar approach. But since Claire once again takes 13.8 billion years to get through all this, I'm going to list these 3 similarities with a bit of supporting audio from Claire, and then we'll go through them one by one. I think I'm representing them very fairly, and if you don't believe me, NoClash's video is right there for you to check yourself. So the similarities are these.
First, by employing this calendar metaphor, the human mind is able to approach unhuman timescales in a human format.
So, similarity 1, a cosmic calendar metaphor allows people to comprehend inhuman timescales.
Second, Carl Sagan's cosmic calendar tells us that the Earth was formed in the end of August, which means it was formed in the 8th month out of 12 months, which is precisely at the point when the universe was in 2/3 of its age. Now, similarly, the Holy Quran's cosmic calendar tells us that the Earth was formed in 4 days out of a total of 6 days, being again when the universe was exactly in 2/3 of its age.
Similarity 2, both the Quran and Carl Sagan's cosmic calendar say the Earth was formed at 2/3 of the universe's age.
When anyone reads Carl Sagan's cosmic calendar after thousands of years, it will remain the duration of 1 year, and it will include future events that are yet unknown to us now. But Sagan is not alone, because the Holy Quran did it first. When you read the Holy Quran, you'll know that the Quran's 6-day cosmic calendar doesn't mean that the universe is going to end in the final second of the 6th day. The scale just continues condensing itself to accommodate the increasing age of the cosmos.
And similarity 3, a cosmic calendar is a constant length, so future events are compressed into it as time goes on. Do you notice anything weird about points 1 and 3? These are meant to be arguments in favor of the Quran having a cosmic calendar equivalent instead of a literal 6-day creation. But points 1 and 3 are just descriptions of what a cosmic calendar is. Well, explaining the concept is great and all, but you already did that, NoClash. At this point, you're supposed to be providing the arguments that the Quran actually uses this concept, and neither of these points even tries to provide that. So they're completely worthless and can be discarded. So the only point that can even be considered an attempt to provide evidence for this assertion is point 2, that both Sagan and the Quran say that the Earth came about roughly 2/3 of the way through the age of the universe. Now, even taken at face value, that's some seriously weak evidence. One instance of such a rough similarity is barely even an interesting coincidence, especially when one of your timelines only has 6 options for when the Earth could be created. It's like looking at modern cosmology and seeing that the Earth was formed kinda sort of around 2/3 or 4/6 of the current age of the universe, and then you roll a 4 on a 6-sided die and you go, wow, this die is a cosmic calendar. I mean, that's identical to what you're doing right now, and it's not exactly impressive, is it? But it gets less impressive when you realize that you're presenting this completely backwards from what the Quran actually says. Here are your translations, NoClash, of verses 10 to 12 of chapter 41, gathered from this video and the last ones I debunked, as well as verse 9 from a different translation, since you didn't show your own wacky translation of verse 9. So let's boil this down to a point form order of events. First, God creates the earth in 2 days. Then he performs a bunch of refinements on the earth in 4 days. He put anchors, i.e. mountains, in it. He measured out its sustenance. And then he turned to the heaven and told the heavens and the earth to come into being. The fact that the earth was already created and refined before God told it to exist is a face-palmingly obvious contradiction in NoClash's own translation, but I've already covered that in a previous video, so there's no need to go over it here. And then finally, God completed the heavens in 2 days and made the sun and the moon, or ended the photon epoch, depending on whether NoClash feels like butchering the translation today. Again, see my previous video. So this all adds up to 8 days, which doesn't match the 6-day creation put forth elsewhere in the Quran and by NoClash here. The usual explanation for this apparent inconsistency seems to be that the 4 days of refining the earth include the previously mentioned 2 days of creating it. Now, I don't find that very convincing, but I'm going to accept it here for the sake of not wasting time, because whether it's a contradiction or not really has no impact on NoClash's argument. So in that case, the Quran is very clear. God took 4 days to create and and refine the earth, and then 2 more days to create the heavens, including the sun, the moon, and possibly ending the photon epoch, 2 of which, contrary to the Quran's assertion, preceded the earth in reality. But NoClash reverses all of this completely and shows the formation of the Earth starting in the final 2 days instead of in the first day. So they're blatantly ignoring what their own translation of the Quran actually says and pretending it says something more convenient to them. The Quran's actual text in no sense matches even the order of events they propose, let alone the time span. So alright, that's the cosmic calendar video dealt with, and that sets us up nicely for the next one, which expands on what the Quran supposedly means when it says 7 heavens.
When you look into the night sky, you look back in time. But how far back in time can you see? The Big Bang Theory tells us that the history of the universe's creation is a history of space eras. Each era in space lasted for a specific period and played a specific role in the formation of the universe after the Big Bang.
As usual, in this video you spend a lot of time explaining stuff that shouldn't need much explanation. In this case, the concept that the further away from Earth you look, the further back in time you see, because the light has taken longer to travel here. We don't really need to cover that because I think that's pretty basic knowledge, so for the sake of time I'm going to skip all that and deal with the parts of your video that are more relevant to your argument. So the overall idea being put forth in this video is that there are 7 distinct eras in the history of the universe that can be seen by looking different distances through a telescope. So let's find out what these 7 eras are.
For example, there was an era where light and matter are formed, an era where light and matter are coupled, an era where light and matter separate, and an era where atoms start feeling the gravity of a cosmic web of dark matter. An era where first stars start to form, a reionization era, and so on, until the era of the many stars and galaxies that exist today.
Great, now we know what the eras are. So let's find out what these 7 eras are. Wait, didn't we already do that?
These 7 eras are the solar system era, the galaxies era, the proto-galaxies era, a reionization era, the first stars era, then the Dark Ages era, until you reach the Great Flash era of the Big Bang itself.
Great, now we know what the other 7 eras are. So as we can see from your picture as you talk, by the Great Flash era of the Big Bang, you mean recombination and everything before it. I find it kind of funny that you call it the Great Flash of the Big Bang, when if anything we can see could be called a flash, it would be the cosmic microwave background radiation, which was emitted when the universe became transparent after recombination, some 380,000 years after the Big Bang. The initial bang itself didn't have much of a flash, at least not a visible one. But hold up, what were the eras shown on your first picture? You know, the one you showed while you presented your first list? I found the full version of that one, and I found that it seems to be a graphic from Time magazine, I guess, by Ed Gable, using the Kingfisher Young People's Book of Space as a source. Whatever though, I don't care where it comes from. What matters is that you think it's worth showing to reinforce your argument. So let's take a look at the eras on here. 1. Superfast inflation, 10 to the minus 43 seconds, so that's the Planck epoch. 2. A seething hot soup of electrons, quarks, and other particles, 10 to the minus 32 seconds, and considering the hot soup thing, I suppose this must be referring to the electroweak epoch. 3. A rapidly cooling cosmos permits quarks to clump into protons and electrons, 10 to the minus 6 seconds, so this is the hadron epoch. 4. Still too hot to form into atoms, charged electrons and protons prevent light from shining. The universe is a super hot fog. Well, that sounds like the photon epoch, and the image says it lasts for 300,000 years, which is close enough. I'm not sure where they found it starting at 3 minutes, but either way, that's what they mean. 5. Electrons combine with protons and neutrons to form atoms. That's recombination. 300,000 years. 6. We skip stuff like the Dark Ages and we get straight to the first stars and gas clouds that will later form galaxies at 1 billion years. Those gas clouds can be called proto-galaxies. And number 7, galaxies clustered together under gravity. I don't know if that refers to galaxies forming themselves or galaxy clusters forming. Based on the context, I'm guessing the latter. The first stars die and spew heavy elements into space, which will eventually form into new stars and planets. Time given, 15 billion years. Okay, how old is this book? 1998, well, that figures. Honestly though, the fact that it says galaxies were just starting to cluster and the first stars were just starting to die 15 billion years after the Big Bang is a little weird, regardless. I'm going to add these to my list with a little bit more realistic numbers, which actually works out in NoClash's favor here since the numbers on this image are way further off from what NoClash said. Before we get back to the list though, let's just take a second to talk about the second picture that you showed. You got that from ESO, or maybe the NAOJ if that credit is meant as an image credit, except there are some really significant and interesting differences between your version and theirs. You flipped the whole image upside down for some reason, you can tell by the placement of the galaxies on the far right side. You photoshopped the dark ages and reionization to be shorter, and you stretched out the last few billion years to encompass half the image. Weird. So as you can see, the original image does not label 7 eras since the Big Bang. It points out a few features of their image to explain what they represent, but that's it. The eras interpretation of this is all you. So, here's our final comparison of the 3 different sets of 7 eras that you presented. 2 of them you said out loud in the video, despite them completely contradicting each other, which is just baffling. And the third one you showed on the screen while you said the first totally different list. Take a moment to look at this table and realize just how badly these things match up. For example, take a look at Era 3. It ranges from a tiny fraction of a second up to 150 million years. And 150 million years is a pretty low estimate for the origin of the first stars. For Era 4, I'm not even sure what the first column refers to, maybe my commenters will have some ideas. But the second and third columns range from 10 seconds to 150 million years again. Only one era here matches up time-wise across the board, and that's Era 1, which starts at time 0. And that's not even to mention the internal inconsistencies within your lists, like having the first stars and reionization as separate eras despite reionization beginning with the first stars that provided the energy for it to occur. Or the second list showing the first stars forming 2 eras before the gas clouds or proto-galaxies that they would have formed in. So what does all this say about your assertion that there are objectively 7 specific eras in the history of the universe? Well, it's not looking good, is it, if you can define sets of 7 eras as vastly different as these? It's almost as if you can put the dividing lines in a whole bunch of different places to create different sets of 7, which could mean that you could also divide it into 6, or 8, or 10, or 14, plus proposed overlapping alternative subdivisions. But no, there's definitely 7, because you want it to match your misinterpretation of the Quran. And speaking of your misinterpretation of the Quran, this is right where you start tossing out verses from it, and so I think it's a good time to split the video. So watch your subfeed, everyone, or the email list you can sign up to at list.logicked.com, because we all know how well that subfeed works. I'll be back in a few days with a part 2, where all of this will come together into, frankly, the biggest twisted mess of an argument I've seen in a while, even from NoClash. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you in part 2.